I married the perfect man, until I found out he was sleeping with my ex-husband. It's almost funny now, thinking about how perfect it all seemed. Like someone handed me a love story already written and just asked me to live it. The charming meet cute. The whirlwind romance. The kind man who looked at me like I was the only person in the room, who always asked about my startup like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. His name was Zach. And the first time I saw him, he was standing under a heat lamp in the hotel courtyard during a startup summit in Austin, sipping something that definitely wasn't the overpriced coffee everyone else was drinking. He smiled at me like he already knew me. Not in a creepy way, in a way that felt safe. "You're Ashley Delgado, right? CEO of Synergy Bloom? Your pitch yesterday." I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a line. Of course it was. But it worked, because he actually had seen my pitch. He started quoting parts of it, not just the buzzwords, but the guts of it. The architecture, the ethical automation model, the parts only real nerds paid attention to, my kind of nerds. We talked for hours that evening. Skipped the after party and grabbed tacos from a truck 3 blocks away instead. He was warm, present, and funny in a way that made me forget how guarded I usually was. When I told him about my product, how we were trying to make AI integrations more transparent for small businesses, he actually listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't mansplain, just nodded and asked questions like, what would that mean for a small bakery? Or could this scale in non-English markets? I felt seen. Not just you're pretty seen, really seen. After Troy, I never thought I'd let anyone in again. Troy, my ex-husband, was the opposite. He'd been charming in his own right, but the kind of charm that dulled with time, like polished brass. When we were together, he made me feel like my ambition was something shameful. Like success was a dirty word if it didn't come with a casserole and PTA meetings. "I just want a real wife," he once told me, "not a CEO in heels." I used to laugh off those comments, tell myself he was just old-fashioned, but over time, I realized he didn't want a partner. He wanted a shadow, someone who stayed quiet so he could feel loud. Our marriage unraveled in silence. No screaming, no affairs, just the steady erosion of respect. When I left, he didn't ask me to stay. He just muttered, "Figures," like I'd finally done the selfish thing he always expected. So when Zach came along, this gentle, curious man who looked me in the eye and asked how I protected user data instead of how I cooked chicken, I let myself believe again. We started dating long distance. He was in Chicago, I was in Austin, but he flew down every weekend he could, and every time he came, he brought something thoughtful. A book on behavioral economics, noise-canceling headphones when I complained about working near a construction site. Once he printed and framed my first company logo, the ugly prototype one, and said, "You should remember where you started." 6 months in, he moved to Austin. 2 months later, we took a weekend trip to a place just outside the city, a quiet hilltop with string lights and a tiny cabin overlooking the skyline. We sat there with wine and music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, the night wrapped around us like velvet. He got down on one knee without any theatrics, just held out a ring and said, "You make me want to build something real." I cried, not because of the ring, but because I believed him. I believed that, this time, I'd gotten it right, that all the years of putting up walls and dodging relationships had been worth it, because here was a man who didn't just love me but respected me. I said yes. Looking back now, I wonder how much of that moment was real, and how much was just an illusion crafted by 2 very clever liars. But I didn't know that yet. Not on that hill. Not under those string lights. Not when I said yes to the man I thought would never betray me. 8 months into our marriage, everything looked perfect. Our home had the kind of warmth you see in lifestyle magazines, mismatched mugs, plants with names, open shelving with spices I never used but liked to display. Zach cooked dinner most nights. I'd come home to the scent of roasted vegetables or pasta, with lemon and herbs, music playing low, a glass of wine already waiting. That night was no different. The windows were cracked open just enough to let in the fall breeze, and the city lights glittered in the distance. Zach had made mushroom risotto, my favorite. He poured me a second glass of wine before I even asked and kissed the top of my head like always. "So," he said, spooning risotto into his bowl. "Tell me about the voice recognition model you're working on." I paused mid-bite. The project wasn't public. It wasn't even in internal discussions outside of my R&D circle. I hadn't mentioned it in interviews, blog posts, or investor calls. Hell, I hadn't even decided if I wanted to pursue it long-term. I forced a smile. "Which model?" "You mentioned it a few weeks ago," he said smoothly. "Something about integrating adaptive audio learning for accessibility?" I hadn't. I was certain I hadn't. But I nodded slowly, playing along. "Right. That one." He kept eating, like it was nothing, like he hadn't just reached into a part of my mind I didn't remember opening for him. I told myself he must have overheard a late-night call or glanced at my notes on the kitchen island. Nothing nefarious, just proximity. Married couples share everything, right? Still, that night, long after Zach had fallen asleep with a book on his chest, I sat at my desk in the home office, staring at my screen but not really reading. Something buzzed just under my skin, a hum I couldn't name. The next day, Laura called. Laura, my best friend since college. The one person who knew me before I had titles, logos, and angel investors. "Hey," she said, her voice too casual. "We still on for brunch Sunday?" "Of course." "Same place?" "Yeah." "Also, weird question." "Shoot. Has Zach been doing any consulting? Like freelance stuff?" I frowned. "No." "Why?" "Well, I saw him yesterday, near that little cafe on 5th. The one Troy always used to go to. I was grabbing coffee and he was across the street just standing there. Looked like he was waiting for someone." My stomach tightened. "You sure it was him?" "Positive." "Tall brown jacket, coffee stain on the sleeve?" That stain had been there since March. I laughed it off. Said he was probably grabbing lunch or running errands. But after we hung up, I sat in my car for 10 full minutes, engine running, hands gripping the wheel. Why would Zach be near Troy's favorite spot? That cafe wasn't close to anything. Not our house, not his gym, not any stores he liked. I hadn't seen Troy in over a year, but I still remembered how he used to sit in that cafe like it was his throne, taking meetings, reading the paper, judging everyone who walked in with oat milk. And suddenly, I was remembering more. I was remembering the way Troy used to scoff when I told him about new product ideas. "That sounds expensive and unnecessary," he'd say, picking at his food. "You invent all this stuff so you don't have to be present, Ashley. You hide in your work because you're scared to be a real wife." I used to think he was just insecure. Now, I wondered if he truly hated me, or just hated that I didn't need him. That night, lying beside Zach, I watched his face in the dim light of our bedroom. He looked peaceful, trustworthy, the kind of man who rubbed your feet when you'd had a long day, who remembered to water your plants when you forgot. And yet, that hum was louder now. It throbbed behind my eyes. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was just afraid of being happy. That when things finally go right, your brain plays tricks on you. Makes you suspicious, cynical. "You're just scared," I whispered to myself. But in my chest, something cracked. The tiniest hairline fracture in the glass of our perfect life. And I couldn't unsee it. Some memories don't fade. They just wait. Sometimes in the back of your mind. Sometimes in the smell of a certain cologne, or the sound of a voice just low enough to make your stomach twist. Troy had been that kind of memory. Our divorce wasn't clean. It wasn't mutual, or peaceful, or mature. Like some couples claim, it was months of shouting matches, silence so sharp it cut, and one brutal accusation after another. "You know why I'm not successful?" Troy had screamed once, slamming his fist on our kitchen table so hard a fork clattered to the floor. "Because of you. You suck the air out of every damn room. You make people feel small. You made me feel small." I'd stood there, stunned. All I could say was, "You made yourself small." He moved out that night, and I told myself I would never let another man make me feel guilty for having ambition. But ghosts have a way of showing up when you least expect them. It was a Thursday afternoon when the email landed in my inbox. A local tech summit. Nothing huge, but the kind of event I like to attend just to stay plugged in. I skimmed through the details on my phone while standing in line for coffee. Keynote speakers, workshops, panels. I almost deleted it until a name caught my eye. Troy Barlow, founder, Intuitera Tech. I blinked. Troy? Speaking at a summit? He'd barely gotten through his last startup without drowning in debt. Curious. I tapped into the session details. And there it was, the title of his talk. Humanized AI, Bridging Emotion and Function in Assistive Technology. My heart dropped. That was my concept. My exact phrasing. I'd been working for months on an initiative to create emotionally intuitive AI for people with disabilities. It was the same voice recognition project Zach had asked about, the one I never publicly discussed. My hands started to shake. I didn't remember ever saying those words in front of Troy, and I hadn't told anyone but Zach the latest version of the framework, the emotional layering, the adaptive response mapping. And yet, there it was, coming out of my ex-husband's mouth at a public event in just a few days. I canceled my meetings and drove straight to Laura's apartment. She opened the door with her usual messy bun and oversized t-shirt that said, "I can't even." One look at my face, and she stepped aside without a word. "He's giving a talk," I said as soon as I sat down. "Troy. At the summit next week." Laura blinked. "That's random." "Not random. He's presenting my idea. The one I told Zach about a few weeks ago." She stared at me, lips parted. I pulled out my phone and showed her the speaker list. When she finished reading, she looked up slowly. "You think Zach told him?" I didn't answer. But I didn't have to. Laura exhaled through her nose. "Ashley, look, I didn't want to say anything before because I know you've been happy and I love seeing you happy, but something's off. First the cafe thing, now this." She sat beside me, her tone shifting from cautious to certain. "You need to dig, trust your instinct. You've built companies from nothing. You know when something doesn't add up, so stop brushing it off like it's in your head." I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to dismiss her, to say she was being dramatic, that it was just a weird coincidence, that maybe Troy got the idea from someone else or came up with it independently, that I was just being paranoid. But another part of me, the part that had built my business, that had outpitched CEOs twice my age, that had survived Troy once already, that part knew better. Zach had access, Troy had motive, and I had been blind. For now, but not for long. I couldn't sleep. Zach was in the shower, humming softly behind the closed bathroom door. The sound of the water should have been calming, familiar, but instead, it rang in my ears like static. Something had been gnawing at me all day, a pressure behind my eyes, a tightness in my chest. I tried breathing through it, counting backwards, grounding myself. Nothing worked. I rolled over. His laptop sat open on the edge of the bed, screen still glowing. I don't know what made me look. Maybe I was tired of pretending. Maybe some part of me already knew what I was going to find. But I reached for it, hesitated for only a second, then pulled the screen toward me. There it was. The chat window still open. A private message thread on a Slack account I didn't recognize. A name I hadn't seen in months. Troy. At first, I froze. My brain refused to register what I was seeing. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was some other Troy. Maybe... no. The little icon beside his name was a familiar photo. A smirking, gym-lit selfie I remembered too well. And the messages. They weren't about business. They were intimate, casual, loving, like two people who had been talking for a long, long time. She's getting close. Almost ready to hand it all over? You're amazing. God, I forgot how good we were together. Soon, baby. We'll have it all. She trusts you completely. It's kind of hot, isn't it? My stomach flipped. I scrolled up, fast, fingers trembling. More messages, weeks of them, jokes about my schedule, details about my team, even my project deadlines. And then this. She's about to map out the full architecture next week. I'll forward the doc once I get it. Love you. I couldn't breathe. Love you. From Troy. To Zach. I stared at the screen like it might blink and disappear. Like, maybe it wasn't real. But it was. It was real. And it was right in front of me. The water in the bathroom stopped. The door creaked. I slammed the laptop shut and stood, my heart beating so loud it drowned out everything else. I didn't even know I was crying until I saw myself in the mirror, face streaked, chest heaving. I grabbed the edge of the sink to keep from falling. The door opened. Zach stepped out, rubbing his hair with a towel, smiling. Hey, you're still up? I turned slowly. My hands were still shaking. How long? I said, my voice hollow. Were you planning to keep fucking my ex-husband behind my back? The room went silent. Zach froze. The towel slipped from his hand and landed on the floor with a wet thud. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look shocked. Just paused. And then, softly, Ash, don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare say my name. The tears came harder now, not just from betrayal, but from humiliation, from the realization that the man I thought was my partner, my safe place, had never been mine to begin with. He stepped forward, cautiously. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I laughed, sharp and humorless. That's what you're leading with? He tried again. It wasn't supposed to be serious. Oh, so it was just recreational corporate espionage? Pillow talk and data theft? My voice cracked. He flinched. That part, at least, he didn't seem to have rehearsed. I turned away, gripping the sink again, trying to stop the room from spinning. I let you into my world, my work, my heart. And you, God, you were just a delivery boy for Troy? Zach's voice dropped. It's not what you think. Don't lie to me. I spun to face him again. You used me, you wanted access, and when I trusted you, when I loved you, you went and gave him everything. He stepped back, like my words had weight. I was going to tell you, he muttered. When? After you launched my tech under his name. Silence. I wiped my face, forcing myself to stand tall. The part of me that had been broken was burning now, alive, awake. I looked him straight in the eye. Pack your shit. And when you're gone, don't ever come back. Morning came with a stillness that felt too loud. I stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around a coffee mug I hadn't touched. The silence clung to the walls like fog. Zach's keys were still by the door. His jacket draped over the back of a chair like nothing had happened. Like he still lived here. Like he still belonged. He walked in, barefoot, casual, as if we hadn't just torn our lives apart the night before. He poured himself a glass of orange juice, took a sip, then finally looked at me. Rough night, huh? The sound of his voice made my skin crawl. I didn't respond. I just watched him, still in the same hoodie he wore to bed, like this was any other morning. Zach sighed and leaned against the counter. You know, he said, almost cheerfully, you were always the early riser. Kind of loved that about you. You'd be up at 6, already on your second call while I was still figuring out coffee. I stared at him. Is that really what you want to talk about? He shrugged, just trying to keep it light. After what I saw last night, his smile faded, slowly, like a mask slipping off. He looked down at the counter, tapped his fingers, then straightened his shoulders. Okay, he said quietly. You want the truth? I didn't move. Just nodded once. He sighed again, heavier this time. It wasn't a game. Not at first. He looked up at me, eyes tired, almost sad. But Troy and I, we were something long before you and I ever met. My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent. He kept going. We ran into each other again a year before I met you. I was lost back then. He had ambition, fire. And yeah, he talked about you, about the way you shut people out. about how you always thought you were the smartest in the room. Wow, I muttered. He really is consistent. Zach didn't flinch. I was supposed to just get close. Find out what you were working on. You were already making waves in the industry, and Troy wanted to be back in the spotlight. He hated how you outshined him. He paused, watching me. But then I met you. For a second, there was something real in his voice. Something I wanted so badly to believe in. I didn't expect to fall for you, he said. But I did. You're brilliant, Ash. You make everything brighter. Being with you was the first time I felt like I wasn't faking it. I clenched my jaw. Then, why keep doing it? His eyes darkened. Because you never let anyone in all the way. Not really. He stepped closer, tone sharper now. You're strong, yeah. But you weaponize it. You make people feel small around you, and when they walk away, you call it betrayal. I blinked, stunned. He wasn't apologizing. He was justifying. You think you built everything on your own, he continued. But you leaned on people more than you realized. And when we took what you didn't protect, you acted like the victim. My voice was cold. You are a thief. No, he said quietly. I'm just the one who admitted you never saw me as an equal. We stared at each other, two strangers now, standing in the ruins of something that never really was. He grabbed his keys. I'll send for the rest of my things. And then he left. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality I wasn't ready for. I stood there in the kitchen, still holding my mug, still waiting for my heart to catch up with my brain. The coffee had gone cold. There's a silence that lives in betrayal, heavy, suffocating, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes even your own breath feel like a lie. I hadn't left the house in 3 days. I sat curled up on the couch in yesterday's clothes, laptop open, staring blankly at a press release someone had sent me in a group chat I hadn't opened in weeks. Troy Bennett announces launch of Neuronest, a new frontier in adaptive behavioral AI. I clicked the link, scrolled, read every line. It was mine. The structure, the branding, the 3-phase architecture I'd been sketching for months on whiteboards and napkins and late-night Slack messages to Elliot. Even the NAMA Neuronist was almost a copy of Neuraloop, my original working title. He just re-skinned it, put his face on my idea, and announced it to the world like it had sprung fully formed from his mediocre, insecure brain. My hands shook as I slammed the laptop shut. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to burn it all down. But all I could do was sit there, numb. The front door opened with a creak. Laura's voice came softly behind me. Hey. I brought Ty and a bottle of something irresponsibly strong. I didn't respond, just rested my forehead against my knees. She moved around the kitchen like she belonged, and she did. Laura was the kind of friend who didn't need permission to show up. She just knew when to come. She always had. We ate in silence for a while. Or, rather, she ate. I pushed noodles around on my plate and tried to remember what food even tasted like. Then, as she washed dishes, she spoke quietly over the sound of water running. They thought they broke you. I looked up. But they didn't, she said, turning to face me. Troy, Zach, they thought they stole your work, your love, your peace. But what they don't get is, you are the idea, Ash. I stared at her, tears burning the backs of my eyes. No one can steal you, she said firmly. They can copy your work, sure, but they'll never replicate your instinct, your mind, your drive. You built this from scratch, and you can do it again, better. I let the tears fall. No resistance this time, just a quiet surrender to the heartbreak and fury inside me. Laura came over, pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in days I let someone hold me. The rest of the night was a blur of cheap wine, bad reality TV, and us cackling at a dating show where no one knew how to pronounce charcuterie. At around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Elliot, 10 minutes ago. Hey, sorry it's late. I found something. I sat up straighter. Elliot, just now, we've been reviewing system logs. Figured we should check after what you told me. There were strange data pulls from your internal folders 3 weeks ago. My blood ran cold. Me? From where? Elliot. IP traced to an Austin location, not our known office range, definitely external. But here's the thing. Whoever did it used admin-level credentials. And masked the session, but not well enough. Me. Do you know whose login it was? Elliot, working on it. But it was someone with deep back-end access. Like CO founder level. They went in and mirrored your architecture docs. I stared at the screen. Every instinct in me screamed confirmation. Zach? Of course, it was Zach. He'd used his proximity to get access. Maybe even guessed passwords. Maybe I'd trusted him enough to let him use my machine once. I couldn't remember. But Elliot was on it now. And Elliot didn't let things go. I looked over at Laura, who had dozed off with a blanket around her and a half-eaten cookie in hand. My heart was still shattered. But somewhere deep inside the wreckage, a spark of fire was beginning to catch. They thought they could destroy me. But they didn't know who they were playing with. The morning after Elliot's late-night message, I forced myself out of bed, determined not to drown in the wreckage any longer. The sting of betrayal was still fresh, but somewhere deep inside, a new resolve was quietly gathering. I met Elliot at my favorite coffee shop, our usual war room, where the smell of strong espresso mingled with the hum of startup chatter. He was already at the table, laptop open, fingers tapping rapidly across the keyboard. "Morning, Ash," he said, without looking up. I've pulled the full logs. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, but I traced the IPs back to Zach's office building. My stomach twisted. "So, it's confirmed." Elliot nodded grimly. "Yeah. And here's the thing, there's more. I cross-referenced some encrypted files they tried to hide. They're copying not just your ideas but client contacts and strategic plans." The betrayal was a knife twisting deeper. But Elliot's steady presence kept me grounded. "We need legal," I said, voice barely steady. Elliot smiled faintly. "Already on it." A few hours later, I found myself sitting in a sleek conference room with Miles Donovan, my new attorney, who looked every bit the cold, precise corporate shark he was reputed to be. "Ms. Harper," Miles began, his tone businesslike but not unkind. "You have a solid case here. Intellectual property theft, breach of trust, and potential corporate espionage." He laid out the stakes clearly, the deadlines looming. "You have a window of opportunity, but it's narrow. You need to act fast, secure your data, notify partners, and prepare for a possible legal battle." I nodded, the weight of it settling in. But instead of breaking me, the challenge lit a fire. Back at my apartment, I started gathering everything. The emails, screenshots, chat logs, project outlines, all neatly organized into a secure folder on a new encrypted drive. I was building my arsenal. Laura arrived that afternoon, bursting with energy and ideas. "We need to reinvent you," she said, already sketching logo concepts on a napkin. "Something fresh, something bold. Your brand is your soul, Ashley. Let's show them who really owns this." We worked late into the night, bouncing ideas back and forth. She whipped up a stunning rebrand, sleek, modern, with hints of the original ethos, but unmistakably mine. Meanwhile, Elliot got to work fortifying my systems. "From now on," he said, grinning, "no one gets in without my say-so." He implemented multi-factor authentication, encrypted channels, and set up real-time alerts for any suspicious activity. That night, as I sat back on the couch, surrounded by the hum of my upgraded setup and the glow of my new logo displayed on my laptop screen, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. The unmistakable thrill of a phoenix rising from ashes. This wasn't just about fighting back. It was about reclaiming my future. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person to air dirty laundry in public. But sometimes, when the stakes are high and the betrayal cuts too deep, silence isn't just painful, it's dangerous. So, with the help of Elliot and Laura, I wrote the letter. Not just any letter. An open declaration. I published it on Medium, titled simply, "The Truth About Betrayal, Business, and the Price of Trust." The post was meticulously detailed. I included screenshots of messages between Zach and Troy, messages dripping with deceit, manipulation, and cold calculation. I laid out the timeline of how they systematically stole my ideas, hacked into my systems, and planned to profit off my hard work. I even attached scanned patent filings, proof that the concepts Troy was now peddling as his own were mine, submitted months before our divorce. I hit publish and waited. What happened next was more electric than anything I'd ever experienced in business. Within hours, the post was shared thousands of times. Comments flooded in, "Queen, they messed with the wrong woman." Finally, the truth. Social media exploded with support. Friends, colleagues, even strangers reached out with stories of their own betrayals and encouragement. But it wasn't just public validation. It was the beginning of the end for them. Zach and Troy's carefully constructed facades began to crumble in real time. They started pointing fingers at each other on LinkedIn and Twitter, their posts dripping with accusations, denials, and desperate attempts to salvage their reputations. It was Zach's idea all along. No, Troy was the mastermind. The chaos was public, ugly, and devastating. Every PR firm in town smelled the blood and pulled away from them. Their clients canceled contracts. Investors withdrew funding. The trust they'd built, or pretended to build, evaporated overnight. Late one night, my phone rang. Caller ID showed Zach. I hesitated before answering. "Maybe one day you'll understand," he said, his voice low and bitter. I smiled, the truth finally settling like a warm weight on my chest. "I already understand," I said firmly. "It's just too late. For you." I hung up and looked out my window at the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt free. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, casting a golden glow over sleek desks, fresh whiteboards, and the faces of a team that believed in more than just an idea. They believed in me. It was a far cry from the chaos and heartbreak that had consumed my life just months before. I sat across from a reporter, her microphone poised, ready to capture every word. "I lost everything," I told her honestly. "My company, my trust, even my sense of security. But through it all, I never lost myself." The words felt true, almost sacred. I was standing on the ashes of what they'd tried to burn down, but instead of destruction, I'd found rebirth. My new brand was growing faster than I'd dared to hope. It wasn't just a business. It was a movement, a testament to resilience, to owning your power even when the world tries to steal it from you. After the interview, I walked through the open concept space buzzing with quiet energy. Engineers brainstorming, designers sketching, marketers plotting campaigns. Each person here wasn't just an employee, they were part of the comeback story. Later that afternoon, I headed out for a meeting with an investor I'd been cautiously excited about. His name was Marcus. We met at a chic downtown cafe, where the smell of espresso mingled with the hum of city life. Marcus was sharp, confident, but there was something else, an easy warmth that made me want to share more than just business plans. Our conversation danced around funding rounds, growth strategies, and market trends. But beneath it all was a subtle current, one that hinted at possibilities beyond spreadsheets and pitches. I caught myself smiling at his jokes, feeling a flutter I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. Still, I kept my guard. My focus was rebuilding my empire first. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus said, "I'm excited about what you're building, Ashley. You're not just creating a company, you're inspiring change." Walking back to my office, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in ages. Hope. They wanted to steal my mind, my future, my fire. But here's the thing about fire. It spreads. It lights up the darkness. It can't be contained. And mine? Well, it was just getting started.